Hello everybody and welcome back to the Leeds Lens for your daily Leeds United news, of course. We have got quite a bit to get into today as Bijol does a damning interview with Leeds United Football Club. Well, not with Leeds United. This always happens, by the way, when they go on international breaks. Naturally, there's always different quotes that come out because players, unfortunately, at that moment in time are not under the sort of supervision of Leeds United Football Club. This will happen across all football clubs in the country. Any player that's not particularly pleased about their current circumstance will naturally speak out in an international break. This is a sort of common practice, but there's quite a lot, if we're being honest, of kind of damning quotes that Bijol says in his interview, which we'll talk all about. I think justified, and you will get onto it, but I do think damning as well. I think that's a fair sort of analogy. We're also going to talk about Leeds United's January transfer window because, again, Leeds United have been linked to Roma midfielder Lorenzo Pellegrini. Yeah, we've been linked to Lorenzo Pellegrini, so we'll talk a bit about that as well. I know this has been mentioned before, but we are going to talk about it again because it has been come up again in the sort of Leeds United news. Football Insider have been talking about it because there actually has been a bit of an update on the Roma end as to why Lorenzo Pellegrini will be leaving Roma this summer, or this January window. So we'll talk about that as well. But yeah, let's get into the Bijol quote, shall we? Because I do think this is quite strong. But anyway, we'll read through it and then you can let me know what you guys think as well. So he said, I am certainly not happy with the current situation. There will always be ups and downs. There will always be slightly worse situations. You have to get over them as a footballer. I am sure that my opportunity will come at Leeds. I hope as soon as possible. But that certainly makes me more eager for competitive matches. And I'm sure that these two international matches will come in very handy. I will give my best as always. I understand the situation. After all, it's not like I don't know why this is. We started the season well. After all, there was no need to make changes to the team. The season is long. Now the results have been a little worse in the recent period. I hope my opportunity will come as soon as possible. But certainly understood why the situation is like this. He also said a lot more, but they were the main quotes that I picked out for today's show. I've got to be honest, that's pretty damning. Especially the quote along the lines of, I think when you look at the whole line, the main quote that I picked out was, now that the results have been a little worse in the recent period, I hope my opportunity will come as soon as possible. That is quite strong. I think it's fair, but it is quite strong. You won't get that when he's currently under the supervision of Leeds United Football Club. That's for sure. But yeah, I think this opens the whole debate, doesn't it? I think where this is going, and the thing I want to talk about here is Pascal Struijk versus Jaka Bijol, because that is the conversation everyone's talking about. Obviously, I don't think Pascal Struijk had his best game against Spurs, which just sort of lit this up really and highlighted the sort of conversation more. And obviously, Jaka Bijol, in his interview there, talking about Leeds United defensively not doing as well in recent weeks, which against fair. I think if you look at sort of the recent games, you couldn't take him out after the first three. We had 2 clean sheets, one against Newcastle and one against Everton, who've been pretty high flying. I don't think they've had a clean sheet since against them, Everton. So they've been a really strong scoring side. Obviously, even scored at Anfield. So you couldn't take them out at that moment in time, whereas now the situation has changed. Leeds United have conceded 5 in the last 3 games. We've conceded 2 at the weekend, where I think, if you're being honest, 2 of them could have possibly gone down to Pascal Struijk. I'm not saying he was completely responsible, but I do think he was responsible. He was involved in both goals, wasn't he? They're both deflections off Pascal Struijk. So I think that is something to bear in mind. But as I said, I think when we talk about this, we've got to start the season and where it was at the moment in time. And the reason that Pascal was in the team is because we started the season, as I said, with 2 clean sheets. And if we're being honest, if you look at the Fulham game, obviously the 4th game of the season as well, we didn't lose that game because of Pascal Struijk. Like, Pascal Struijk did nothing wrong in that game at all, and it was just a Goodmanson sort of crazy header. So that situation, yes, I think we're all calling for Bijol to come into the 11 at times, but he wasn't playing too badly, was he, Pascal Struijk? Peacock Whites of LUFC says, hi mate, hope all is well. All is good with me, Peacock Whites of LUFC. Hope all is good with you too, mate. I actually like that we've got quite a bit to talk about, because I think people wanted this debate anyway between Struijk and sort of Jaka Bijol. I think it's just an obvious conversation point. So it's nice that we've actually got away in with, obviously, the Jaka Bijol interview. But yeah, then let's look. I was thinking about this logically. So we've looked at the first 4 games. I think Pascal Struijk's not done too badly. Now let's look since that point, because this is obviously what sort of Jaka Bijol has said. We conceded 1 against Wolves. I don't think that was on him. I think obviously our 2 centre-backs opened up, which allowed Krejci to come through and score a goal. But for me, Sean Longstaff, that's his man. I think he should follow the runner. He doesn't follow the runner. Yes, I think maybe Obviously, Struijk and sort of Rodon should have better positional sense to not split and allow him straight through the middle. But in the same breath, Longstaff should follow through. However, I think where we're looking at sort of the biggest game, because again, I think Bournemouth, all right, maybe you could blame him for the goal right at the end when he didn't win that initial contact, but you could also bring Joe Rodon for that. I think the game that's highlighted it all is obviously the Spurs game. When you look at both goals, there is responsibility there, isn't there? There is responsibility for sure, in my opinion. The first goal for me, and I think when we've seen Pascal Struijk and what he has been this season and what he is as centre-back, if he's got one main key flaw for me, it's the sort of lack of intensity in the way that he closes people down. He too often lets people do what they want against him and get the shots off that they require. Like look at Kudus. The goal that he scores at the weekend, he allows him to come all the way inside. I know it's a mistake from Goodmanson, by the way, but he allows him to come all the way inside from the right-hand side and get a clean shot goal. And it's exactly the same mistake he made with Gyökeres against Arsenal. So that is a key flaw in his game. And even think with the Matthias Tell one on the first goal, again, can he be tighter? Should that be, say if that's Virgil van Dijk, that doesn't end up going off him with a deflection, does it? He blocks that cleanly, and the ball ends up going back up the pitch because he's blocked it cleanly. He doesn't get a slight block on it because he's tighter. And when then the ball gets struck by Matthias Tell, rather than there being a gap where there's an option for a deflection, it'd be so tight that they wouldn't be able to get a deflection, just hit him clean in the shin to block the ball. So that is, I think they were both not hideous errors by Pascal Struijk. Like, it's not even as bad an error as the Goodmanson thing. And I think part of this conversation, if we're being honest, and I think the reason that sort of Pascal Struijk's been talked about so much in the Leeds fan base in recent weeks is not because he's been totally awful, but because it's a conversation point. Because there is an obvious competition there. With Goodmanson, he makes a mistake against in the Fulham game, of course, losing that header at last buzz. Regardless how you look at it, he makes a mistake there. He had a really bad game for me. He was probably the worst player on the pitch, actually, against Spurs. But you're never going to have a conversation about Goodmanson because the backup's Sam Byram. But when you've got an obvious backup there in Bijol, naturally it shines a spotlight onto Pascal Struijk. So even if he does little mistakes, like I think they were against Spurs, naturally they're going to be highlighted because, of course, that is the conversation starter. Everyone wants a Bijol versus Pascal Struijk debate. That is what people want, naturally. That's a football fan. We're looking at where the team can change. Like, has Stack's performances been that awful? Maybe not. But when you've got Tanaka there, sort of knocking on the door, putting in a good performance like we saw, naturally that's going to create debate and it's going to put natural scrutiny and more eyes on a Pascal Struijk performance, on a Stack performance, when you've obviously got a backup there. So that's something to bear in mind. However, where I look at it for me in this certain climate is, I think this is the perfect time now to bring in Bijol to an extent. And the reason for that is, one thing you don't want to do when you've had a player out the team loads is change your back four. And you don't want people coming into your back four cold. This is a perfect time to bring Bijol in because it's an international break. So naturally he's going to play 2 times for Slovenia and he's got games under his belt. So then you've got the best opportunity to bring him in, bring him into the first team naturally. Because, of course, he's played 2 games for Slovenia. Whereas if he'd have played against, for example, Spurs, naturally it would have been much colder because the last game he would have played would have been Slovenia over a month ago. So this is a perfect situation for it. It's also a perfect situation for Bijol because, of course, the game that actually Struijk played the worst in was probably the Spurs game, which was the most recent game too. And I've seen a few comments that I'll get into after it. I just want to finish my chatter about this and then we'll go into your guys' sort of conversation with it. So that's number 2. However, on the reverse side, when you look at Pascal Struijk, and when I was looking at this, I was thinking, why would he stick with Pascal in the Burnley game? And then I was looking at sort of what are the best attributes that each individual player has, and what attributes does some players have that the other one doesn't? And I think if you look at the best attributes that Struijk's got in comparison to what Bijol's got, it's probably 2 things for me. It's the ability to play out from the back. The best, I think he's better on the ball. I think he runs into midfield better from what I've seen, even in the short glance against Sheffield Wednesday, but even what we've heard from Italian sources regarding his time, obviously, at Udinese. It's his ability on the ball that Pascal delivers because he's strong on the ball, Pascal, and it's his recovery pace. Because if there's anything we heard, remember, in the summer about Bijol, that recovery pace in behind his paw. Now, this is where the sort of conversation comes for me. Because if you look at the top attributes that a centre-back is going to need for the Burnley game in particular, them 2 are going to be massive. Them 2 are going to be key traits. Because naturally, other than against any other team really in the division, against Burnley more than anybody, Leeds are going to be a progressive team. We're going to be the one in control of the game. We're going to be the one pushing the team forward. which suits them attributes. Because, of course, if you're the one progressing the game and if you're the one pushing forward, naturally your line's going to be higher because you're going to try to squeeze the opposition in, which is what we're going to do at Burnley. So we are going to play a high line. And, of course, if you play a high line, you need the recovery pace. And not just that, but we're naturally, I think, in the Burnley game, going to have a higher amount of possession than they do in the game. Again, which should aid what Pascal Struijk gives you in terms of ability on the ball, which makes the conversation more difficult. I think if we're playing, say, Arsenal after the international break, it's obvious Bijol comes in because the traits that we require from Bijol in that game, or in that particular game against Arsenal, the matchup, suits Bijol's game a lot more. Whereas if all games that we actually come back to the international break, it's probably the one that Struijk suits the best, which is why the conversation becomes difficult. Because for me, if he doesn't get in to the first game against Burnley, unless Struijk has a complete howler, he probably won't get in then. In the next game, obviously, against West Ham, because obviously then Struijk will keep his place again. So that's what makes the conversation difficult, which is why I think there's a slight issue either side. As I said, the main problem is that the next game suits Pascal Struijk's sort of skill set, in my opinion. Scott, I find it difficult to pay too much attention to football at times like this. When we have poor results, the fan base becomes fatalistic and start to act like a relegation cult. To an extent, I think people are natural. I think, Easy, your opinion has always been that Leeds United are in the top 10. I think that's, from what I've seen from the Leeds United populace and what I've talked to when I'm going to games, etc., when I'm talking to other Leeds United fans, that's been a positive stance. I don't think a lot of people agree with you on that. So, I think a lot of people think we're going to be in a bit of a dogfight this year, me included. So naturally, every time we have a bad result, that is going to happen. But I know what you mean. We're not in a position at the moment to be in a relegation scenario. I think the Burnley game is massive for that, because I think when you look at the next Burnley game, in my opinion, or the Burnley game at the weekend, or the next weekend, if we lost that Burnley game, I think people will become seriously nervous in this fan base. I think the Burnley game is quite similar to the Wolves game in that regard, because I look in the Wolves game, if we lost that game, there would have been a very, very different outcome in the fan base to how it was when we won the game. And because it was sort of on a sort of, it was a ticking time bomb at that moment in time. And then we just got it back, and we sort of, the positivity could come through again because we won. And I think, again, we're in this situation where we beat Burnley, it all looks fantastic again. We probably go back into the top 10. I think if we lose that game, it looks a bit more negative, in my opinion. You've said, Easy's come back and said, I have every confidence in the squad and refuse to doubt them. Unfortunately, I've always doubted Farke. But I hope he can turn things around. If we fall below a point a game, Farke needs to go. Okay. I think this has always been your stance, Easy, so I understand that, because this has been where you're at with it. I think we're slightly different on that, but I know what you mean. I think what we are 8 points after, is it 6 games at the moment? So yeah, so if we lost the next 2, I think if you lost the next 2, he's under pressure, because it's 3 losses on the bounce, 1 point in 4, and they're pretty decent games. So I think that's probably fair. Although, obviously, as we know, the total to stay up this year, we're thinking he's going to be around 40 points, like it always is. Obviously, that a point a game is 38 points, so you're not far off. So he won't, for me, he doesn't, even if you think he's going to get, I don't think you think he's going to get sacked. I think your stance is that you would sack him. I don't think the board will sack him in that position, personally. Anyway, let's get back to the Bijol conversation. So where does that leave you? We've talked about, obviously, the Struijk's game in terms of a skill set, and we've talked about Bijol, obviously, it being a perfect time for him because he gets international breaks, so becomes more refreshed and has played games under his belt, so he doesn't come in cold. What would I do? I would start Bijol for me. I think I would start Bijol. There's a reason for this. I think the reason I would start Bijol, I understand that actually the game doesn't fully suit Bijol. However, it still suits him in terms of, I think it'd be a physical battle against Burnley. We know that suits him. Naturally, Bijol is better from corners. His underlying data says he's better from corners. We've conceded a lot of set pieces. Again, Burnley, you'd expect with strong on set pieces. Naturally, they might play with 3 centre-backs. So I would start Bijol. But the main thing over all that is that I think he's probably a higher ceiling centre-back than Pascal Struijk, in my opinion. I think he's that next calibre of centre-back, which is why we bought him, by the way, because we haven't bought him to sit on the bench. We've bought him to start because we see him as a higher ceiling centre-back, in my opinion. So at some point, we've got to integrate him back into the 11. And actually, when you look at a game for him, I know I've said that it suits Struijk in terms of a skill set, but it's not playing the hardest game in the division. So even if he's a bit cold coming into it, which naturally will be because he'll have only played for Slovenia, I think it's an easier game for him to play against because he's up against Lyle Foster, who's not one of the best number 9s. It's not like you're throwing him against Haaland in the first game. It's not like you're throwing him against Isak. This is one of the worst front lines in the league. So it's a good opportunity for Bijol to come in, hopefully do well and give good confidence, even though I think it suits Struijk more. Because I think at some point we've got to integrate Bijol into this 11 for me. Because what's the point for me when you've got a higher ceiling defender on the bench just to leave him on there? I think we've got to find a way to integrate him. And there's never going to be a perfect scenario to do it. So I think now Struijk's had it's a sort of a poor game. I think an underperformance against Spurs. I think this is the perfect opportunity for Bijol to play. Although, as I said, it's a shame it's the game that it is against Burnley in a way. Because, as I said, it does actually fit Pascal Struijk's skill set. I agree. Easy, but Fart will be okay. What do you think we need to do? What I do think... I've read this wrong. I'll read it again. I agree, easy, but Fart will be okay. What I do think is we need to rotate the squad a bit. I disagree on this, actually. I disagree on the squad rotation thing. I think you need squad rotation when you play midweek games. I don't think you need to squad rotate when you're playing week to week, in my opinion. I think when the games come around and we've got FA Cup games, I know we're already at the League Cup now, but when we've got FA Cup games, or when there's that time when there's a Premier League game in the middle, or even at Christmas when we know there's a load of football, I think you do need to rotate then. I don't think you need to rotate for me in a period when you're playing one game a week. I actually think the complete opposite. Because I think when you look at I looked at Brentford at the weekend and Gary Neville made this point. Brentford at the weekend hadn't played, I think, for about 8.5 days, and they looked off it in that first half. And he was saying one of the reasons could be that they're not actually match sharp because they've just had 8 days off. So you need to keep players playing. And I agree. I think we've got to build consistency in the team. And I think you build consistency naturally when you're playing sort of once a week. I think that's the perfect time. As I said, if we're playing midweek games, fine, rotate. I don't think we need to rotate everyone we're playing once a week, in my personal opinion. I don't think we need to do it. Because then, if you say you rotate and take, I don't know, Stack out the team for rotational purposes and bring in Tanaka, then Stack's not going to play for a whole 2 weeks, which is a long time. I don't think we need to rotate at all. I actually completely disagree on that. Easy says, remember when we won the 90 points trophy? Nobody knows how many points we need to avoid relegation. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy to claim 38 points should be enough. I do agree with that to an extent, and I do think that I think this points year will be higher than it's been for a long time. I think I don't know if that's where you're going with this, Easy, but I do think the points total will be higher this year. However, what I will say to that is, I think if you get something like 45, you're definitely all right. There has never been a time when 45 hasn't kept you up in the division. So 45 will be enough because you can go off statistical data at that point. Yes, maybe 38 sends you down this year. It hasn't done for about 6 or 7 years, but I think this year could be the strongest it's been in the 6 or 7 years. But I don't think if you go for 45, you're definitely staying up, aren't you? Because I think it gets to a level where teams are not going to get that. Because if you've got 45 to stay in the league, it means the league's going to be messed up all over the place. Because naturally, that means that bottom teams are going to be taking points off top teams. When we know we've got 3 really strong teams in this division in Liverpool, Man City, and of course Arsenal. So I disagree on that. I don't think we're going to be on for a hideous point. So it's not really like 50. But I do think that if you get 45, you'll definitely be enough. I do think 40 will probably be enough. It has been for so long. I think over the last 15 years, 40's only sent you down once. So you've got to bear that in mind. I think. But I know what you're saying, because we got told 90 points would have been enough in every single year before, and then obviously the year after, if you'd have got 90 points, I think Sheffield United would finish above you. So I do get your point. It's about league position at the end of the day. It's not, even if the points total's 20, then we need to be getting it, don't we? But it's going to be higher than 20, of course. But yeah, that is my situation on Jaka Bijol, by the way. I am interested to know where you guys stand on this, because I think it has been a hot point. And I do think as well, like I said, I do think that people have been over-scrutinising Pascal. Like, I've seen the amount of attacks I've seen on Twitter for Pascal when he wasn't, like, hideously responsible, because I think there's a forced conversation there with Bijol obviously being an occupier. When you look at sort of Goodmanson and his performance against Spurs, of course, I think it was slightly harsh. But yeah, I do think we should bring Bijol in. We only need to rotate players not performing, and that includes DCL and Ampadu. No one should be guaranteed their place. No, I agree with this. I do agree with this. I think there's certain players where we just don't have an option. Like, we've got to play. Like, for me, unless Goodmanson is absolutely stinking it out at left back and he's totally horrendous, I don't want to play James Justin at left back because we haven't got an obvious replacement. Whereas I think when you look at sort of the two positions you're saying, we do have Nemecha naturally up front who can play there and can offer a similar skill set. If he was absolutely awful, DCL, I do understand playing him. And again, even with Ampadu, I think Ampadu's massively important from a captain standpoint. I think in terms of, you just have to look at the underlying data with Leeds United win record and win percentage with Ampadu in the team to with Ampadu out of the team. It's night and day. So I think we've got to, when we talk about Ampadu, if we're thinking in our heads, all right, he's not performing, we do need to look at, yeah, but what does he offer in terms of a captain's performance, and what does he offer in terms of leadership skill set? Yes, he might have not done the greatest, he might not have end the game with the greatest passing accuracy, and he might not have won the most tackles, and he might have had a poor game, but has he made other players better? Because obviously it's all about the team, it's not about individuals. So if Ampadu makes the team better even when he's underperforming, he should be in the team. But I do agree, like you could throw, I think we're in a lucky position in the midfield where you could throw Stack into a holding midfield role quite easily. Then you could go with Longstaff. Then you could go with Tanaka. So there is options in there. But I agree with you. I don't think we need to rotate for rotate's purposes. I do think Biel should play. Yeah, I think I agree. That's what EOS is getting at, easy, with players not having good games, take them out and put others in. Yeah, so that's what you guys are saying, that if players are not playing well, then take them out, and which I completely agree with. And I think that is where the conversation comes, because I think there's a few positions on the pitch at this moment in time where there is conversation. I think probably the main ones for me are probably Perry versus Darlow in goal when Darlow's back. I think it's Nonto versus Aronson on the right-hand side. I think it's probably Tanaka versus Stack at this moment in time. And I think it's obviously because Bijol versus Struijk. I will, for the record, have a video tomorrow regarding this topic area. Tomorrow's video isn't unfortunately not going to be live, but it's all going to be about what is Leeds United's best 11. And in that, I will reveal who would I play, Aronson or Nonto on the right-hand side. Would it be Tanaka? Would it be Stack? Would it be Perry? Would I bring him in? Or would I stick with Darlow? And, of course, would I go with... Who else did I mention? There's another one, or have I mentioned them all? Anyway, Bijol or Struijk, which I think you've got the idea now. BMG, it's nice to see you, mate. I haven't seen you in ages. Missed the start, but on Bijol, it's unfortunate the defence, especially centre-back, is the best rotated position. Struijk and Roden are doing well, so Bijol just has to wait. I'm sure he'll appreciate that. Yeah, exactly. I completely agree with that, BMG. And it's nice to see you, mate. It's been a long time. I haven't seen you in the chat for a while. You might have been watching, but you hadn't put a comment in for a while. But yeah, no, I do agree. The only thing I would say is I think, especially in the Spurs game we were mentioning, if you when you get to the end, you can obviously replay it if you'd like. And we basically talk about the idea that Struijk actually didn't have his best game against Spurs, and this is a good opportunity to integrate Bijol into the team because he won't be coming in cold against Burnley because obviously he's playing naturally for Slovenia, which he won't have been playing in the thing. Perry has to play, in my opinion. Interesting. I will talk about that tomorrow in tomorrow's video. It's a great having that option too. Yeah, it is. I think when we look at sort of next year's team, if we get into the next iteration, I do think the more players we can bring in, the more rotated we can be, and the more options we can have. Where we've got a Bijol versus Struijk conversation, where we've got a Tanaka versus Stack situation, where we've got an Aronson versus sort of non-situation. We want these conversations all over the pitch. Because at the moment in time, we've got like Goodmanson at left back where he's got to play every game no matter if he's crap or not because we haven't really got anybody else. And it would be nice when we get to next summer to upgrade some of these backup positions. So actually there's conversations all over the pitch. Like again, I think on the left-hand side with Okafor for me, he's almost, unless he's literally horrendous or gets injured, he's almost undroppable on the left-hand side because we haven't got anyone who can offer anywhere near the same level of output, in my opinion, or anywhere near the same effect on the team. So it'd be nice when we look at a summer transfer window and where we can go with it, and even in January, to upgrade some of these positions so we've got competition all over, but actually good competition, like we've got with Pascal and Bijol, of course. It'd be interesting to see how many games Fark gives a player who performs before he rotates. I think with Farker, for me, the way I've always seen it, I think it takes ages to bring players out, in my opinion. I think he always has. I think he's been quite. I think he's got his sort of a few of his players that are very favoured, in my opinion. And I think he will stick with them for ages. I think we've seen this the whole time. I even remember last year, like when we talk about Pascal, I actually don't think, controversially, Pascal is a favourite of Daniel Farker, because if you look even last year, the amount of we had at a moment in time, Struijk gets injured and Ampadu goes into centre back, and he didn't just instantly bring Pascal Struijk in to replace Ampadu last season. He left Pascal on the bench for ages, and it actually required, I don't know if you remember it, but it actually required a mess up against Sunderland where Ampadu got rolled in the first half by Isidore, and then in the next game you saw Pascal Struijk come into the 11. So he actually, I think he has got favourites, but I actually don't think Pascal's one of them. I think there's other players in the team, naturally, who are more favourited. I agree with you that people are jumping on Struijk a bit. I don't think he's done a great deal wrong. Very unlucky with both Spurs goals. Yeah, I think that's to an extent. I think he just should be a bit tighter, is my personal opinion. I think the mistake is he's got to be tighter. Like, I think Van Dijk blocks them. But obviously Van Dijk's the best centre-back in the league. So, but I do think a top centre-back just blocks it cleanly. I don't think he gets it doesn't get a deflection into the goal for me. Rotation comes in when you need a certain player to do a certain job against a certain team. Yeah, I think this is important, Mr. Whitestick. It's probably something we haven't talked about. But I don't think at this moment in time we've got loads of that, in my opinion. I don't think we've got, like... I think Bijol naturally could come in against, for example, if we're playing a physical team who've got some of a really strong number 9, powerful, I would put Bijol up against him because I think that's a better matchup. But in the same breath, I think it's different at centre-back, of course, because naturally you don't want to change your back four every single week. I mean, you look at Amorim at Man United, he's changing his back three every week. It's a nightmare. It doesn't work. You've got to keep... With your back four, it's different to other positions. And actually, sort of, Bijol mentions this. It's a completely different position at centre-back. Naturally, you've got to build up consistency. You've got to play the same every week. I think where that's different, Mr. Whitesnake, is in midfield, there'll be certain games I think that naturally suits the Tanaka, where it's a bit less physical in there. And there've been games that naturally suit Stack, who's a bit more got the physical presence, and we need the height in there that obviously Stack offers. But I do agree with you. I think that is where it offers. But I don't think at the moment we've got a lot of players that you can go, oh, he's perfect because we're playing against this opposition, because we don't have great depth, in my opinion. But that's natural because we're a newly promoted club, aren't we? And I hate that as a punch word, but I do think that's important to bear in mind. Like, we're not going to have ridiculous depth because we are a first year promotion club. Bijol will likely play in the cup. Yeah, I think we need to play. I think we need to play him before that though, because for me, he's just got that next ceiling. Let's have a look. Nothing will make Ampadu a centre-back. Yeah, I agree. I hated it. I absolutely hated it. Most managers will stick with a decent centre-back pairing and will only sub a centre-back if there's an injury, maybe a yellow card, or if we're defending a lead, maybe. Not much opportunity for Bijol yet, but it'll come. No, I do agree. I just think we've now got quite a nice time. I think we've got quite a nice time, in my opinion, to come in for me. I think we've got this is quite a nice opportunity and a nice time for Bijol to come into the side with him being fresh out of international break and actually sort of striking out of in his greatest game. Bring on Perrault. He's almost scored the equaliser against Spurs and knows how to score. We will go back and forth on Perrault forever, easy. I just don't think, other than finishing, I don't think he can offer anything that Calvert-Lewin can offer at all. I don't think he can run the channels. I don't think he holds the ball up well. He's not as good in the air. He's nowhere near as good in the press. He's not physical enough. It just doesn't, for me. I don't think that's ever going to happen. Can you summarise more or less what Bijol said? I've seen it and missed the start of your vid, sorry. He basically said that he's disappointed why that he's not been playing in the team, because I think Daniel Farke said at the start that he was a statement signing for us, a marquee signing, and I think the summary is that he's basically disappointed in the situation he's in, but he understands why it is, because actually the players have been playing really well, and he's been happy that Leeds United are doing well because he wants Leeds United to stay in the league. And that sort of thing. That's the sort of summary. But he also did mention BMG, which I think was important, which is one I highlighted, that actually in the recent weeks they've not been as good. So maybe he'll get his opportunity now, which again I think's strong, but I can agree with. Anyway, let's move on to Lorenzo Pellegrini, because we've talked enough. We've definitely talked enough about Bijol. I mean, we've done 28 minutes on Bijol alone. I hope you're not bored out your brains by that. Anyway, let's move on, to Lorenzo Pellegrini, the Italian midfielder, Roma, 29 years old. Basically, Football Insider have been talking again. Now, of course, of all outlets, Football Insider, not the greatest. I think that's fair to say. I think we can all agree that Football Insider are not the greatest. However, if you are going to believe a journalist in the Football Insider world, there is only one that you can do, and that is Peter O'Rourke. He is the best one by an absolute mile. I think there's a few others. Flaz, Fletcher. I won't even bring him up in the show, I don't think. But actually, Peter O'Rourke is the best one of them all. And he's been basically saying that at the moment in time, Lorenzo Pellegrini obviously does want to leave Roma. And in the Roma side, he's currently had a bit of a tension with the fan base. So I think there's been something that's gone on between Pellegrini and the actual Roma fans, which might force him out in January a bit more. And also, obviously, as we know, his deal does expire in the summer. So, of course, with his deal expiring in the summer, naturally, he could be able to leave it on a cheap price and a budget price for Leeds United in the January transfer window. So I think it's quite interesting, actually. I think with Pellegrini, I think the club will, I think it's an interesting profile. My only situation with Pellegrini is, when we talked earlier even about rotation, we just don't need a midfield player. Like, if we've got a certain budget and we're working on a tight budget, let's prioritise the positions we actually need. And yes, I think Pellegrini might be an upgrade on what we've got in midfield, but could we get someone like Pellegrini on the right wing, where we'd see a bigger jump in sort of ability, in the sort of we get a bigger jump in sort of ability from what we currently have. Because I think that's something that's important. Yes, I quite like Pellegrini. And he's an attacking midfielder, gets goals. I think he's got, I can't remember exactly, but I think he's even got a few goals this season. I think he's at least got one goal this season. But he's sort of a number 8 box crasher, but can play the 10 role. He's not really a number 6. He's more of the attacking creativity. But he's actually quite tall as well. I think he's about 6'1". So he's a bit of a creative specimen, is Pellegrini. And maybe it's a profile missing in the midfield. But my only thing with the Pellegrini situation is that I quite like the midfield balance at the moment. I don't think we need to go and get a number 10, in my opinion. And I look where we need players in for me, as I said, for the most of anyone on the team. And it isn't the midfield. The midfield, actually, we've got a bit of depth with the likes of Tanaka or Stack, that I think they're going to fight it out. I think Longstaff sort of cemented it at this moment in time. And I think Ampadu has as well. So I don't think, if we're working on a limited budget, unless he's cheap, which he will be, of course, with his contract expiring, I just don't think it's really needed to do Pellegrini, in my opinion. For me, as I said, of all the positions, go get yourself a right winger. That is the position Leeds United are in. We've got Aronson playing on right wing, and I've heard from lots of Leeds United fans that Aronson offers a lot to this team on his pressing and this and that. For me, he's terrible, if I'm being honest. The truth is, I understand what he can do when he wins fouls and he works hard. I think Nonto's a better player than him. I don't think Nonto's defensive work's that bad. I don't think that Dan James's defensive work's that bad. I even remember Ollie once saying, and you don't have to listen to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, but he once actually described Dan James as the best right-wing defender in the world, or the best defensive winger in the world. So why now he's terrible at defending either? I think what happens with Aronson is, because he plays less than totally diabolical in some games, our fans go, yeah, but for Aronson, it's a good performance. Yeah, but maybe for an actual good right winger, it'd be a bad performance, because he's not good enough. He really, I know Aronson was in the team that got us up, and we do have a collection of fan base that quite like him because he works hard, and I get that. But that is that one. If it was just about working hard, I'd be in the Leeds team because I'd work harder than all of them, because I absolutely love this club. I'd run to my death if I could for this football club. So it can't just be about working hard. To get in the Premier League and to play for this club in the Premier League, it's got to be more than working hard and pressing, because anybody can do that. As I said, I could become we'll get Mo Farah playing on the right wing. He's a good runner. He runs marathons now. It was a gold medal in 10,000 metres. Let's have him on the right wing then. Do you know what I mean? Like, I get it, but I haven't heard anything with Aronson except he's pressing off the ball. That is literally it. And maybe he's quite agile and a decent dribbler, but he can't be a decent dribbler because he gets knocked off the ball too easily. So, I don't know. So, for me, go get yourself a right winger. Yes, Pellegrini, if we can get him on the cheap, fine, let's bring him in. But I think our priority position is a right winger, and it will consistently be right winger. Because the other thing is, as well, we need a winger desperately, because if Okafor goes down at this moment in time, we don't have a winger that, for me, at the moment, does like they're going to do anything in a game state. I look at Okafor, only brings on the left-hand side, scored 2 goals now, but he's actually off for a threat, takes people on, drives at people, he's strong, physical, brings people into the game, holds the ball up, does a lot of stuff on the left-hand side. And I look what Aronson brings on the right-hand side. And even if you put Nonto there, or even if you put Dan James there, I don't think you see a level of performance we're seeing from Okafor on the left-hand side. So for me, we need another Okafor on the right-hand side, because otherwise we haven't really got anyone, in my opinion, that's going to offer a threat out wide if it's not going to be Okafor, of course. Let's have a look. Let's look at some of his comments. Have we had any links to any right wingers? We've had Harry Wilson. We were talking actually the other day on the stream about getting Traore on the right wing. I actually quite like that, but I don't think that I don't think that that's going to happen. It is difficult to ignore the bias we all probably have for Aronson. He's never going to be a game changer, but he's done a job lately with James and Nonto injured. We've needed him. Yeah, I do agree with that. I think he's done. I think Brendan Aronson's level, if you look at sort of what Okafor brings, sometimes I will criticise Okafor when he actually has a better game than Brendan Aronson, because I know what standard he can achieve now. We've seen it in recent weeks, and I expect more from him. What I've seen from Aronson is, in terms of how good he is, he tries his hardest and he will give everything. And actually, for his level, he's playing quite well. So, for example, if you put me at right back, I would look like the worst ever right back in Premier League history, in Championship history, in League One history at right back. But I actually might have a good game for my level. And it's the same with Brendan Aronson. He's having a good game for his level, but his level's not high enough. So that's all it is with Brendan Aronson. It's not a criticism on his work ethic. It's not a criticism on him as a person. He actually seems like quite a nice guy, quite a bubbly guy, quite a good guy in the dressing room, and clearly wants to work hard and get himself into the team and improve where he can. But unfortunately, so do I. And I can't be a professional Premier League footballer because I ain't good enough as much as I'd want to be. And I'd work harder than Brendan Aronson because I actually am a Leeds United fan. Anyway, that is the conversation regarding Pellegrini. We are linked. There is an option there, but I don't think it's going to happen personally because I just don't think we need that. And if we do, I will say, like if we bought Pellegrini and they went, well, Leeds United spent the money on a midfield player over a right winger, I'd be going, fine, but what are we doing? We need a right winger more. Because you've got to prioritise your priority positions. Like, we're not going to buy another sort of left-footed centre-half, are we, when we've got Struijk and Bijol? That's my sort of conversation. Anyway, thanks all for watching, as always. Hope you enjoyed the show. I've quite enjoyed tonight, actually. I always like the international break when players do quotes, and I think we'll get some more quotes. I don't think there's anyone that's going to be as shocking as the Bijol one, naturally, because, of course, Bijol's not been in the team. But I've enjoyed it. I think it's been a really good show tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. Let's see some of the comments regarding Aronson, and then I will go. So you're saying we need to raise the floor of the squad up to Premier League standard? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying, mate. Aronson has shown a few decent moments in the attack later. I do agree we need better, though. Yeah, I think most fans do. I think there's some fans who sort of just love Brendan Aronson. But I do think there's more. I think there's more people who can accept what he's trying to do, but obviously just know he's not good enough. Great show, says Peacock Whites. Thank you very much, mate. But yeah, unfortunately, I can't be here tomorrow as well, live, because I am busy in the evening. However, there will be quite a good show tomorrow where we will go into the sort of key positions and the key battles in the team at the moment. It's all about what is Leeds United's best team at this moment in time. So the questions will be, do you want what Easy wants and Pro up front? Probably not, have a little hint. Tanaka or Stack in the midfield, being another big conversation. Nonto should be back from his injury on the right-hand side, so should he play? And Bijol versus Struijk, although I've given that away today, so we won't talk about that too much. And then, of course, Perry in goal. So quite a bit to get into tomorrow as well. Last week you were wanting our keeper. You were wanting to be our keeper. Now you're on the right-back spot. Mate, I'm multifunctional. I can play multiple positions. I'm versatile now. I'm joking. Anyway, thanks all for watching, as always, lads and lasses, and I shall see you all later, everybody. Bye for now.